Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for staying with us for the whole day. We're almost there. It's an amazing conference so far, isn't it? Yeah, give me some thank you. Thank you so much. And so today we're very lucky. So we not just have one former chairman from CFTC, we have another former chairman from CFTC. So we have Chris here, who's gonna do our closing keynotes. Welcome him. Thank you so much.
So great to be with all of you. Let me see if I get this microphone on. How's that? Can you hear me? Yeah, good. So great to be with all of you. We've spent so much of today looking forward into the future, peering over the horizon as to what the 21st century is going to look like and the new digital networks of money and value. But I do want to just sort of begin my remarks today with a peer backwards, if I can, and actually with a question. Something very important happened right here in Boston exactly 249 years ago this very day. Does anybody know what that possibly could be? It's all right. I'll give you a little bit of a hint. And it's the opening two lines of a very famous poem. And it is, "Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere." Well, actually, the ride didn't begin on this day 249 years ago, but the catalyst that led to the ride happened this day 249 years ago. In 1774, the order was given by what was then the central government for a small army of troops to row ashore from the city of Boston here to Cambridge and to muster under the dark of night and then head into the countryside to go through private property, to go through people's homes to find caches of arms and ammunition. And that took place on the 18th, but the order was given on this day. And the reason why I think that's important is because that army that set out was very powerful and very confident of success. It was the same army that had defeated French continental forces and the Austrian army in wars across Europe for decades before. And yet, within 24 hours of leaving the city of Cambridge, that army retreated back, frightened, bloodied, and mostly defeated. And how could that be? How could that be possible? Well, setting out from Cambridge that same dark night were two solitary riders, and one was the famous Paul Revere, a well-connected and socially prominent citizen. Those two men, when they left Cambridge, journeyed wide, but in different directions, but with the same mission, and that was to sound an alarm. And as explained by Brandeis professor Paul Hackett Fischer, rather than the romantic solitary ride depicted in Longfellow's poem, Paul Revere's task was to activate a decentralized regional network of partially acquainted college students, militia captains, local officials, townsmen, craftsmen, farmhands, church leaders, tradesmiths, and blacksmiths for a wide area of counties around this area. And by daybreak, that loose citizens network produced several thousand opponents to the armed incursion, who went on to challenge it in the towns of Lexington and Concord, and then decimate it along the road back here to Cambridge. In just one day, a centralized military force was defeated by a decentralized network of free citizens, setting in motion the American Revolution and political independence of Great Britain. And less than a decade and a half later, the US Constitution added a Bill of Rights, including the provision that said, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. That's the Fourth Amendment, the basis of the notion of private rights of citizens that we enjoy today. In his masterful 2018 work, The Square and the Tower, Networks, Hierarchies, and the Struggle for Global Power, historian Neil Ferguson looks at the historical interplay between centralized power, the British regulars, and decentralized social networks, the Minutemen, and the threat that each of them have perceived in the other throughout the course of human history. All right, so here we are, 2.5 centuries after that momentous events that happened right here in Cambridge. We're gathered at the Harvard Blockchain Conference to discuss new and profound global societal changes. We're headlong into an information-based and digital network world and a clash between centralized power and control and decentralized digital networks. And this time, it's about money. Oh, my. In short, in this 21st century, the internet is doing to finance, doing to banking, and doing to money what it already did in the 20th century to information gathering, Wikipedia, retail shopping, Amazon, entertainment, YouTube, social networking, Facebook and Twitter, and photography, TikTok, and journalism, and so much more. And what is that? To increase speed, efficiency, and automation, lower costs, further inclusion, unlock new business models, challenge traditional market structures and central authorities, displace intermediaries, and perhaps create new ones. And it's also raising the question whether this new internet of value will truly enhance economic liberty and financial freedom. Or will it rob free citizens of liberty in a similar way to how the second generation internet centralized information and speech in the hands of a few big tech giants? So what I'd like to do in the next 20 minutes or so is issue a challenge, and indeed a call to action, an alarm, unlike that of Paul Revere. And that alarm is to say that we must make the future of digital finance one that is worthy of free society and true to the new world values of human liberty and financial freedom. And to do this, we must first accept the reality that modern money is changing and changing very rapidly. Money is expanding from fungible cash bills and electronic notations on the balance sheets of central and commercial banks and changing into unique digital notations on new digital infrastructure operated by global decentralized collectives, but also national sovereign governments and large and giant private sector entities. The Atlantic Council is just out with new information on the global adoptions of various forms of central bank digital currency, or CBDC. The headline number is that 134 countries and currency unions, representing 98% of global GDP, are now exploring CBDCs. And 4 years ago, that number was only 35. In fact, 68 countries are now in advanced phases of exploration, development, pilot, or launch. And that includes 19 of the G20, with China placing its digital yuan, what it calls its ECNY, in over 260 million digital wallets, and a figure that's 2 years old, by the way, and the EU planning to roll out its digital euro by 2025. At the same time, global stablecoin usage continues to increase dramatically. Stablecoins settled over 11 trillion on-chain transactions in 2022, almost surpassing the payment volume of Visa, and reaching 14% of the volume settled by ACH. The supply of stablecoins has grown from less than 3 billion 5 years ago to over 138 billion as of January 2023. And of course, decentralized crypto, like Bitcoin and Ethereum, continues to grow in notional value, computing power, and distributed ownership. Bitcoin has now surpassed the Swiss franc to become the 13th largest currency in the world. So here's the point. Whether or not any one country deploys central bank digital currencies, global citizens will be dealing with CBDCs, stablecoins, and crypto in the century to come. The sometimes fashionable debate between CBDCs and stablecoins and crypto is a false choice. The future is all of the above, and that's clear. 4 years ago, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, some colleagues of mine and I announced the launch of the Digital Dollar Project. The project operates a neutral, nonprofit forum to consider how best to modernize the US dollar and preserve its reserve currency status and the values we believe it represents in that coming world that I described of both decentralized and centralized digital currency networks. The Digital Dollar Project provides what you might call a safe space, where thoughtful consideration can take place away from the polarization of contemporary politics and social media. And after the past 4 years, the project's engagement with both the public and the private sectors has devolved into critical topics of CBDC privacy, risk, security, cross-border payments, and perhaps most important of all, interoperability. From hosting privacy roundtables at leading educational institutions to releasing the first in a series of risk and privacy working papers, the Digital Dollar Project has been engaged in helping define a Bill of Rights for CBDC privacy in a digital age and understanding the implications and necessary next steps for thinking of the future of money. Additionally, the project published the first ever U.S. wholesale CBDC pilot study with the Depository Trust Clearing Corporation, and the first ever in history retail CBDC pilot of the US dollar with Western Union and BDO Unibank of the Philippines. Now, to be clear, the Digital Dollar Project does not call for deployment of a US CBDC and is very supportive of stablecoin development. The project asserts, however, that the US should only consider issuing a CBDC once key design elements of privacy, security, distribution, and economic stability are properly understood and democratically addressed. But the project does encourage the US and other free societies to assert principal leadership in CBDC experimentation at home and digital currency standard setting abroad that is consistent with civic norms and values of free society. A few months ago, outside of Washington, the Digital Dollar Project co-hosted with the Atlantic Council a first-of-its-kind gathering of international policymakers, technologists, financial service providers, innovators, and consumer and privacy advocates from across the globe to explore the digitally networked future of money. And the 3-day-long event brought together deputy governors and ministries of finance from 13 central banks, including 12 federal agencies, and was live streamed to over 100,000 viewers. I'm here to report to you that over those 3 days in Washington, 2 conclusions were very clear. Digital currency networks, both sovereign and non-sovereign, and centralized and decentralized, are coming, and they're coming very fast. Secondly, that the time for global standards, dare I say, enlightened democratic standards, is now. And the backdrop to this quickening advance of digital currency networks is an increasingly multipolar, complex, and fragmented world, one driven by war, global conflict, and political and social division. The latter 20th century financial system, dominated by multinational banks and the US dollar and Pax Americana, is gradually yielding, sadly, but indubitably, to a 21st century worldwide kaleidoscope of overlapping and partially interoperable, digital networks of value. Some are decentralized like Bitcoin. Others will be variously centralized and operated by global banks and big tech companies. And others will be deployed by national governments and even exported for sale as white label CBDC in a box for the developing world. And here's the danger in that world. Those centralized digital currencies that emerge, both sovereign and non-sovereign, will be gathering points for massive amounts of data about the economic and financial activities of users, of citizens, and of voters. And many thoughtful people across the political spectrum, from left to right, are appropriately concerned about misuse of these large honeypots of private financial information. They're concerned about direct access by central governments, global banks, and big tech to those troves of personal financial information. And they anticipate political and commercial pressure on private sector actors to conduct surveillance, to gather information, to report on activity, and even to disable financial transactions with disfavored groups and activities in a similar fashion to the now increasingly evident and quite deplorable censorship of speech on social media by both government and big tech firms. Just last month, the US Supreme Court heard arguments on whether the federal government can coerce social media platforms to censor speech it doesn't like. And guess what? No surprise, the central government argued that it may rightly and quite robustly coerce censorship of internet speech. That's very troubling. And it's very troubling for what may happen in the digital network future of money. In the future, where the provision of wallet and digital currency services likely will be subject to federal or state licensure, commercial providers may find their license jeopardized if their digital currency products are used to pay for things that some current or future bureaucrat does not want citizens to have, however legal. What if a federal stablecoin authority decided to revive Operation Choke Point, a US government initiative of a decade ago to pressure financial institutions into denying services to lawful but politically disfavored businesses, such as pawn shops, or same-day check cashers, or gun manufacturers, or ammunition providers? Unfortunately, legislation currently moving through Congress may allow stablecoins to become the next vehicle for government suppression of free speech. And that's because the legislation does not forbid government licensing authorities the discretion to coerce stablecoin providers or even commercial servicers like wallet providers to deny services to lawful but politically disfavored businesses. Commercial operators, after all, will not be bound to uphold constitutional freedoms and privacy rights. Well, this gap in that legislation needs to be addressed to prevent political pressure being placed on digital service providers to bar transactions with legal but politically unpopular industries. And the simple fix to the problem is to provide that federal and state government licensing authorities have no discretion to pick and choose amongst otherwise lawful activities and to condition licensures on the stablecoin's denial of legal transactions. This fix would enable stablecoin operators to reject unweaning government pressure to disable otherwise lawful transactions and allow them to provide legal certainty to stablecoin providers. All right, let's look at this, though, more broadly than one piece of legislation currently moving here in the United States. Let's look at this globally. Regardless of the form of digital currency, if it's centralized, whether or not it's sovereign or non-sovereign, it's imperative that free society thoughtfully consider privacy implications and insist that the emergence of digital networks of value be consistent with constitutional values, social norms, and civil rights. We believe that designed properly, a digital dollar, or indeed a digital euro, a digital pound, or any other digital currency, and stablecoins should run on systems that are operationally and objectively transparent, providing the public with independent assurance about technical function, security, and resistance to impermissible monitoring, data mining, and other exploitation. Citizens in a free society should not have to rely on a government or a stablecoin operator to say, trust us, we're not invading your privacy. Digital currency users should be able to see for themselves that they are not being surveilled and manipulated. In fact, individual economic privacy and censorship resistance should be affirmative design features and competitive advantages of digital systems of value worthy of free societies and open economies. By encoding individual economic privacy into its very architecture, CBDCs and stablecoins should serve as desired instruments for people the world over who aspire to financial autonomy and inclusion consistent with basic human rights and civic values. And as an American, I feel that anything else is a betrayal of the American independence and the US Constitution and those things that began right here in Cambridge that I talked about almost 2 centuries and a half ago. So as I start to close, I want to reference a terrific book just published by Frank McCourt, founder of Project Liberty, and my good friend, the digital journalist Michael Casey. In a book entitled Our Biggest Fight, Reclaiming Liberty, Humanity, and Dignity in the Digital Age, McCourt and Casey explain how the second generation phase of the internet, information became centralized and controlled by big tech. In this Web 2 world, we lost control over our lives in what McCourt called digital feudalism. And they went on to write, it's as if we're marching back toward the Middle Ages. Our sense of agency has been seized by us from a clutch of corporate behemoths. By scraping and seizing our data, hiding the influence of their proprietary algorithms, and persistently surveilling our online activity, these big tech giants have stripped us of our agency and of our capacity to set the course of our own lives. Well, McCourt and Casey have it exactly right about the state of Web 2. But what about Web 3 that we've been talking about all day today? Will Web 3 live up to its promise if big tech and or big government behemoths centralize the coming internet of value with control over our everyday economic choices, our spending, and our financial activity? In the free market economies of the 21st century, what is liberty after all, other than how we make a living, how we invest for the future, how we support the people and the causes and the institutions that are important to each one of us? Are we willing to compromise those financial decisions to the priorities of big tech, big banks, and big government? One more historical analogy, and this one's closer to home. 30 years ago, the first wave of the internet rolled across the globe. Then the US, the EU, and other leading democratic nations, the heirs to the Age of Enlightenment, made sure that the internet of information reflected the values of open and free societies rather than closed and repressive ones. They made sure that the architecture of that first wave of the internet was an open architecture that couldn't be controlled by closed societies of the world. Well, today the free world and free people must again work together to make sure that the coming internet of value reflects those values of financial freedom and economic liberty. Together we must drive global standards for digital value networks that are suitable for human worth and human dignity. So here's my plea to you this afternoon. Here's my alarms being sounded in the middle of the night. We must work together as our enlightened predecessors did, as those Massachusetts yeomen did, to ensure that the future of digital currency networks is one that enhances freedom and the free world. We must set standards for digital currencies, both sovereign and non-sovereign, that are worthy of human liberty and people everywhere who aspire to liberty. We must get to the task at hand, Let's not be intimidated by this innovation, but seize it to enhance the dignity of our fellow men and women. Let's shape the future of finance, banking, and money itself in accordance with our finest and most noble human values. Thank you very much.